When my grandfather was getting older, towards the end of his life, I was visiting my parents on military leave. It was over the holidays. My grandfather called me over and I drove to the house. I sat down and he said, I want to give you something that's been in the family for a very long time. My great-great-grandmother, she saved up her whole life to buy a set of diamond earrings, big 1-carat earrings. She wore them, and then when she passed, your great-grandfather, my father, received both of those diamonds, and he had them made into these gold rings. And he kept one for himself and he gave one to his brother Perce. And those two operated the family meat market in New Haven until they retired. And that business, they poured their lives into it, and they wore these rings on special occasions. When they passed, they gave those rings to me. And I've held on to these rings ever since they passed. And now I'm giving this one to you and one to your father. And I said, thank you so much. I'm humbled. I'll cherish this ring. It was beautiful. It was a 1-carat diamond in a gold setting, and it really only fit on my pinky. So yellow gold. I didn't wear it very much, but I kept it as safe as I could. But as life in the military, as anyone who's been in the military knows, you move a lot. And you move like 4 or 5 times over the course of a 10-year stint. If you're like me, I moved all the time. And in the course of one of those moves, I'm sad to say, I lost the ring. And I was sick to my stomach. I had arrived at a new duty station in San Antonio, and I realized that I couldn't account for the ring. I thought I had hidden it in something and that I would eventually find it throughout the course of living at that new house. You know, sometimes we stash a passport or valuables in like a folder and tuck it into a briefcase, and then you take your valuable stuff in your car and you let the movers move all the other stuff. And I knew I thought I had at least packed it and kept it in the very important stuff that I had moved in my own personal car from the previous duty station to San Antonio. But as it happened throughout the course of that assignment from 2020 to 22, the ring never showed up. And I became increasingly disillusioned as we approached the end of that assignment, and I was getting ready to move to Virginia in 2022. I couldn't account for the ring. I never found it. I kind of quietly accepted to myself that I had maybe lost it. It was just a source of shame and regret that I hadn't taken better care of the ring. And of course, I didn't tell anybody, and my grandfather had died in 2020, so I was just completely eaten up inside that I had lost it. But life goes on, and so I spent 2 years in Virginia from 22 to 24 and was preparing to move back to Connecticut. Unfortunately, in the process of that, I went through a divorce, and I ended up moving back to Connecticut, and in fact moved into the house that my grandfather had lived in. My aunt and my dad both owned the house, and we were able to structure a transaction that allowed me to get back inside that house. It wasn't sold, and I began the process of improving it and so on. But I was going through a divorce. I was pretty raw. I was going through a career transition from being a military officer to somebody in the private sector, and there was a lot of stress and adjustment and insecurity associated with that. My ex kind of took half of her share of the household goods when the movers came. So when the boxes arrived, I moved ahead of her. So when the boxes arrived, I just went through the boxes, and I realized, that ring is still gone. At some point after being here in my grandparents' house, I got a call from my ex, and she goes, "Do you know the contact information for the owners who bought our house in San Antonio?" And I said, "Yeah, I think I still have that." She goes, "Because I ordered a package and I accidentally had it delivered to the old address." Now remember, this is the house where I had lost the ring. I got a call back a day later, and she said, "You're not going to believe this." She goes, "When I called the owner of the house to intercept this Amazon package for us, he says to me, 'By the way, did the two of you happen to leave behind a gold ring and 2 passports?' And she goes, 'Yeah, we did. How can I get those?' And eventually we learned that they had found the ring and the passports in the top shelf of the closet. They had been tucked really far back. And I recall that I was probably headed off to go do a trial at some Air Force base in North Dakota, before the rest of our household goods had arrived and before I'd really grown comfortable in that neighborhood, and it made sense that I would have hidden away some of our valuables. So I had not lost the ring. The ring was coming back to me at the same time that I had just moved back into my grandfather's house, the house where he had died. And I have to think that that was one level of serendipity, but it gets better because before I found out that the ring was going to get returned, I had confided in my dad. I said, "Dad, do you still have that ring that Grandpa gave you, the gold ring that he gave one to me and one to you? You still have that?" And he goes, "You know what? I don't. I've lost mine. I can't find it. I don't know where I tucked it away." And I said, "That's the strangest thing because I can't find mine either." So we both kind of had a moment where we said, "That's insane. How did we both lost these rings? That's a tragedy." And 2 weeks after I found my ring, he found his. It was in like a sock drawer. So was that a coincidence? Probably. That was an awfully compelling coincidence to be reunited with this ring that I had lost for 2 years, only like 2 months after I moved back into my grandparents' house. You know, I had a lot of doubt about whether I had made the right choice to return home and leave the military and come to Connecticut after being away. And I think receiving that ring kind of told me that the universe was aligning and that it was a sign that despite going through this family transition and having a lot of trepidation about what was going to happen in the future, would I be successful in this new career? Would I be able to rebound and get back on my feet? The arrival of that ring told me, I think, what I needed to know, which was that I was in the right place. And I felt the presence of my grandfather. And I think he had a hand in making that happen.